This is A News. I'm Bakhtiar Sanov, and let's begin with the top headlines making news around the world. Venezuela earthquake toll rises to 235 as rescuers race to find survivors on the building rubble. Tehran strikes ship in Strait of Hormuz as countries try to reopen oil route. And NATO's special representative for the Caucasus and Central Asia has met with senior officials in Azerbaijan for talks on regional security. The international response to Venezuela's devastating twin earthquakes is gathering pace as rescue teams race against time to find survivors. With millions potentially affected and humanitarian needs growing, countries around the world are stepping up assistance. Alistair Souza has more from Washington, D.C.
Confusion, despair and heartbreak. Rescue efforts to find survivors continue across areas affected by Wednesday's powerful twin earthquakes. The UN says nearly 7 million people could be affected with no homes, no shelter, with really nowhere to go. From Europe to Asia to the Americas, countries around the world are offering support. Rescue teams from Mexico, Spain, Qatar, all pitching in. Here in the US, the situation is being closely watched, with the US State Department pledging $150 million in assistance. 2 U.S. Navy ships in the Caribbean have been assigned to support quake relief operations, and a U.S. Marine general has arrived in Venezuela to oversee U.S. relief efforts. Now, the United Nations aid chief saying the UN is coordinating international rescue teams in a country where 8 million people already required humanitarian assistance before the quake, that goes to show how the quake is making a horrible situation even more catastrophic. The 72 hours after the earthquakes will prove critical in finding survivors. Aftershocks are expected to bring down more buildings, causing more lost life and property. Meanwhile, Venezuela's crucial oil sector has not seen major disruptions, though, given the earthquakes happened far away from crude infrastructure. The disaster adds to the woes of a country struggling to emerge from years of economic depression, where alleged corruption and mismanagement have left everything from hospitals to rescue services and other critical infrastructure in poor condition. Alistair D'Souza for A News in Washington, D.C.
Behind a growing death toll in Venezuela are thousands of families whose lives changed in seconds. As rescue teams continue searching through the rubble, survivors are recalling their escape, while others wait for news of loved ones.
Heavy machinery tears through mountains of concrete as rescue teams search for survivors in one of Venezuela's worst-hit neighborhoods. Volunteers have joined the effort, forming human chains to clear debris by hand. Anxious relatives can only cling to hope as they watch. Among the collapsed buildings is this residential tower where local reports say at least 17 people were pulled out alive from the rubble. But there are fears others are still trapped.
A friend of mine lived in that building with his daughter, and they still haven't been able to get them out. We need to stand together. There are so many things I can't even find the words to say, but we really have to help the people who have been left homeless.
We saw the building collapsing, how it was being crushed in on itself. A concrete slab fell from above and hit me. When I turned around, another slab came down, and the force of the building collapsing threw me away from where I was standing, towards a woman.
The Venezuelan government has announced various measures to respond to the disaster as aid from the international community pours in. Meanwhile, local residents say more help is urgently needed.
Many people need help here. We hope other countries can provide support, sending in heavy machinery and rescue personnel, because many people are still buried under the rubble. We also hope that the government will send soldiers, firefighters and police from Caracas and other states, as the situation here is terrible and people are trapped. We need more manpower, machinery, equipment and drinking water. This is just the beginning, but it's clear that it will get very hard for us. Almost the entire state of La Guaira has been destroyed.
For those still waiting for answers, every passing hour brings diminishing hope.
To examine the political, economic and humanitarian consequences of this tragedy in Venezuela, I'm joined by Diogo Castro Silva, political analyst, speaking to us from Sao Paulo, Brazil. Diogo, thank you very much for joining us on A News.
Hi there.
Hi. Diogo, before discussing the political implications, how would you assess the scale of this disaster and its immediate impact on Venezuela?
It is quite significant. If we want an example of the region, not quite as significant as or impactful as the Haiti earthquake some years ago, but it's a big scale and it impacts a country already fragilized in terms of infrastructure, and this is it provokes even more destruction.
Diogo, the earthquakes have struck a country whose economy was already under severe strain. How much more difficult does this make the recovery effort?
It piles on the extreme economic crisis that, as you correctly put, that Venezuela has lived for many years. I mean, just for our audience to understand, Venezuela GDP is probably less than half than it was 10 years ago. So it's really an economy that is struggling to recover, and this is obviously something that will complicate that recovery.
So Venezuela's infrastructure has suffered years of underinvestment. Did that significantly worsen the scale of destruction?
Yes, I must say, although the earthquake is tragic and it is not a huge earthquake by other measures, so in that sense, even amidst the tragedy, one must say it could have been a lot worse. Compare this kind of destruction. Japan, I think this week also had earthquakes of similar magnitude. For people to understand what is the importance of infrastructure,
yes.
In Japan it barely destroyed any infrastructure, and here in Venezuela we are seeing these pictures.
So rescue and search operations are receiving international support from countries that often disagree politically. Could this disaster create an opportunity for greater diplomatic cooperation?
I think one must discuss that also in terms of what are the challenges to the regime. I think if you look at the external front, the regime, we must first state that the regime has been living in a kind of limbo. That was by purpose. When the US removed Maduro and supported the ascension to power of Delcy Rodriguez, this was not regime change, but this was not neither the same status quo before. This is so, like I say, the regime is in a kind of limbo, both internally and externally. Externally, it creates an opportunity to renew diplomatic cooperation with countries, even in the region. I believe Ecuador is supplying, for example, aid, and Ecuador, of course, is of another ideology, totally different. So, yes, in that sense, it can lessen the isolation of the regime.
So millions of Venezuelans have already emigrated over the past decade. Could this tragedy trigger another wave of migration across Latin America?
No, I don't think the earthquake alone will do that. I think when people moved was because of political repression and misery. I think this earthquake is impactful, but not impactful enough to provoke a mass migration. The people that left and could have left, they already left. And I don't see a disaster of this magnitude provoking that, to be honest.
So, Diogo, how do you expect the government to balance emergency relief with long-term reconstruction when public finances remain extremely limited?
Well, that comes to the crux of the question of the regime situation. The regime, like I said, is in a limbo, even in terms of internal legitimacy. This is an opportunity. You have two extreme scenarios, one positive and one negative. The negative was always that Venezuela falls into a kind of civil war after the removal of Maduro. That was one extreme. The other extreme was a peaceful democratic transition, provoked by the removal of the Maduro. We are in the middle. Now, the actions that the government will take will have an impact on how we approach one scenario or the other, because this is a kind of an opportunity for the government to increase its legitimacy if it manages with competence this disaster. On the other hand, it can provoke the anger that is being controlled by because Maduro was removed, but the regime didn't fall. So we are really at the crossroads. And specifically in the question you ask, I think they will have to balance. But like I said, although the earthquake was significant, it is not as extreme to impact, for example, long-term recovery that is more linked to the recovery of the oil industry, at least in the short term.
Diogo Castro Silva, thank you very much for your valuable insights and for taking the time to join us from Sao Paulo. We greatly appreciate your time and analysis. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
A magnitude 5.8 earthquake struck Japan's Chiba prefecture Friday, shaking areas near Tokyo, according to Japanese authorities. The Japan Meteorological Agency recorded a maximum seismic intensity of 4 on its 7-level scale and confirmed that there is no risk of a tsunami. No information has yet been reported regarding casualties or damage following the quake. The latest tremor comes just a day after a powerful magnitude 7.2 earthquake was also recorded in Japan, raising concerns over continued seismic activity in the region. Maritime tensions are escalating in the Gulf following an attack on a commercial vessel near the Strait of Hormuz. The incident has prompted the suspension of an international escort operation, raising fresh concerns over the security of one of the world's busiest shipping routes.
The UN International Maritime Organization paused its operation to escort ships through the Strait of Hormuz on Thursday, following an attack on a vessel in the Gulf of Oman. The UK Maritime Trade Operations Centre had earlier said a cargo vessel was hit by an unknown projectile off Oman, causing damage to the ship's bridge. No casualties or environmental damage were reported. Reuters sources identified the ship as the Singapore-flagged Ever Lovely, while a security source said it was likely targeted by a drone. 2 US officials also told Reuters that Iran had fired on the ship, while Iran's Persian Gulf Strait Authority said vessels outside routes it has set will not be guaranteed safe passage. Secretary-General Arsenio Dominguez said to ensure coordinated approach and navigational safety, the IMO evacuation plan will be paused until further notice. The decision came hours after the IMO and Oman announced an evacuation plan for more than 11,000 seafarers stranded in the region amid heightened tensions and maritime security concerns. The IMO was helping to get hundreds of stranded ships and thousands of seafarers out of the strait, where they had been stranded for months since the start of the war in late February. Meanwhile, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio says Washington and its Gulf allies are opposed to any Iranian fees or restrictions in the Strait of Hormuz, following a meeting with Gulf Cooperation Council countries in Bahrain.
Saudi Arabia looks to be restoring oil exports through the Gulf after a month of disruption that forced shipments onto alternative routes as regional producers ramp up output following an interim deal between Washington and Tehran. Shipping data shows oil giant Saudi Aramco resumed loading crude at its Ras Tanura terminal on Friday for the first time since March the 8th. Two very large crude carriers were loading at the port, with another waiting nearby. The company had diverted exports to its Red Sea terminal at Yanbu after an Iranian blockade of the Strait of Hormuz during the conflict with the United States and Israel prevented ships from entering the Gulf. Tehran has welcomed the clarification by the Italian government over the use of its bases for the United States to launch attacks on Iran. It follows statements by NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, who said on Wednesday that hundreds of American planes took off from Italian military bases. Rashid Lolo has more.
Iran's foreign minister has praised Italy for its strong rejection of remarks made by NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, who said the U.S. military used Italian military bases to launch attacks on Iran. Following Rutte's remarks, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni said Italy's role in direct attacks on Iran was portrayed incorrectly. Abbas Araghchi had a phone call from his Italian counterpart Antonio Tajani on Thursday to clarify the matter. He also called for an explicit and official denial from Italy of the statements made by Rutte. According to Iran's foreign ministry, the Italian foreign minister stressed that none of his country's military bases were used to attack Iran, and that no such action would be done in the future. Iran's foreign ministry spokesman Ismail Baghai also reacted strongly to Rutte's remarks. He said NATO and its member states, including Italy and Romania, must be held accountable for any complicity in war crimes committed by the US and Israel against Iran. In a post on X, Deputy Foreign Minister for Legal Affairs Kazem Garibabadi wrote that based on UN resolutions, if Italy and Romania bases were used to carry out strikes on Iran, Tehran would consider it an act of aggression by those who authorized the attacks. He said the statements by the NATO Secretary General give rise to the international responsibility of the countries involved. Rashid Lolo from Tehran for A News.
Staying on this topic, France and Italy will spearhead a new multinational coalition to support Lebanon after the UN peacekeeping mission ends later this year. Speaking after talks in Antibes, President Emmanuel Macron and Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni announced the joint initiative is designed to bolster Lebanese sovereignty and directly strengthen the country's armed forces. The leaders also proposed convening an international transition conference coordinated with the European Union and the United Nations. Israel and Lebanon have rejected claims that Israeli forces withdrew from parts of southern Lebanon, despite a U.S. official saying troops had pulled back from sections of a buffer zone. The remarks come in the middle of U.S.-mediated talks on a phased arrangement that could see territory in the south handed over to the Lebanese army. A U.S. State Department official described the reported move as a good faith step, saying Lebanese forces should move in to secure the area and dismantle militant infrastructure. But Israeli officials denied any withdrawal, saying military positions in the buffer zone remain unchanged. So we'll continue with the main stories of the day after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to A News. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he has authorized a 40-day campaign of strikes deep inside Russia, aimed at increasing pressure on Moscow to end the war. Moscow came under an overnight drone attack, with the city's mayor saying Russian air defenses shot down at least 39 Ukrainian drones approaching the capital. Ukraine also reportedly struck 2 oil refineries in Ufa and an oil depot in Russia's Krasnodar region, with local officials confirming the depot was hit. The attacks also triggered power outages in Russian-occupied Crimea and the parts of the Kherson region. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte says tens of billions of dollars in new defense-related contracts are expected to be announced at the alliance's upcoming summit in Ankara in July. Speaking at the Atlantic Council, Rutte said the deals would mark a significant boost to NATO defense cooperation.
Spurred by President Trump's leadership, we see household names like Lockheed, RTX, Northrop Grumman, Boeing and General Dynamics massively ramping up their production to meet this moment. We also see newer firms like Anduril, Palantir and Divergent Technologies innovating on tech and production methods at pace and with purpose. That is revolution. Bottom line, the prospects are plentiful. And in Ankara we will provide the platform to showcase how we are seizing the opportunities and making this revolution a reality. We will announce tens of billions of dollars of new contracts. And when our industries from Arlington to Ankara combine their strengths and step up supply, the result is not only improved security. We are in the early stages of a defense industrial revolution that will help grow our economies and support hundreds of thousands of jobs on both sides of the Atlantic.
Romania's Chamber of Deputies has tacitly advanced a controversial draft law proposing the unification of Romania and Moldova after lawmakers failed to debate it within the constitutional 45-day deadline. The initiative, introduced by the far-right SOS Romania party, now moves to the Senate, which has the final say. Although the proposal is not legally binding and has received negative opinions from the Romanian government and parliamentary committees, it has reignited debate over the future of Moldova, European integration, regional security and relations with Russia. To discuss the political significance of this development, I'm joined by Chongor Veresh, foreign policy expert, joining us from Almaty, Kazakhstan. Mr. Veresh, thank you very much for joining us on A News.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Dr. Veresh, first of all, explain what exactly happened procedurally. Does the Chamber's tacit adoption indicate political support, or was it simply a procedural consequence?
So just let's to be clear, Romania has a parliament with 2 chambers, and one chamber's tacit or silent adoption should not be interpreted as total political support. Procedurally, the Chamber of Deputies simply failed to debate and vote on the draft within the constitutional deadline, so the bill was automatically considered adopted and sent to the Senate. Politically, this is a procedural silence, not an endorsement.
So the Romanian government and parliamentary committees reportedly issued negative opinions on the draft. What were their main objections?
The main objections were constitutional, legal, and diplomatic. The government and committees consider that Romania cannot decide unification by an ordinary unilateral law. Such a process would require democratic consent, probably referendums in both states, constitutional procedures, maybe a bilateral treaty, and detailed rules on many things like citizenship, institutions, minority rights, etc., and security, of course.
Dr. Veresh, what are the realistic chances that the Romanian Senate will approve this proposal in its current form?
The realistic chances are very low in its current form. The Senate is the final chamber, as I said, and the proposal arrives there with negative institutional opinions and major constitutional weaknesses. it is more likely to be rejected or heavily amended or just simply delayed than approved as drafted.
In your view, how is this development likely to be viewed in Moldova, where public opinion on reunification has historically been divided?
In Moldova, the reaction will be mixed. Unionist circles may welcome it symbolically, but many others will see it as premature, provocative, and useful to the pro-Russian narratives. Moldavian public opinion on reunification has long been divided, so any unilateral gesture from Bucharest can easily become politically sensitive in the capital, Chisinau.
Dr. Veres, could this debate strengthen or complicate Moldova's ongoing path toward European Union membership?
I think it could complicate Moldova's EU path if opponents use it to argue that the European integration is only a cover for absorption by Romania. Institutionally, however, Moldova's EU accession process is separate and already underway. The EU will almost certainly continue to focus on reform, sovereignty, institutional capacity, and democratic legitimacy.
So Russia has consistently opposed closer Romanian-Moldovan integration. How do you expect Moscow to react politically and diplomatically?
Moscow is likely to react harshly at the rhetorical and diplomatic level. Russia will probably describe the proposal as Romanian expansionism, NATO enlargement, or a threat to Moldovan statehood. It may also use the debate to strengthen pro-Russian actors in Moldova and fuel anxiety around Transnistria and Gagauzia.
Dr. Veres, from an international law perspective, what legal and constitutional hurdles would need to be overcome before any unification could even be considered?
The legal hurdles would be enormous. Any real reunification would require the free consent of both populations, constitutional procedures in Romania and Moldova, probably referendums, a bilateral treaty, and of course the international recognition. It would also have to address Moldova's neutrality clause, because in their constitution it stated that they are a neutral country. And the two regions of Transnistria and Gagauzia.
So what role could the European Union, NATO and key Western partners play if reunification ever become a serious political project?
The EU, the NATO and key Western partners would play a stabilizing and maybe a gatekeeping role. They would not support a unilateral process. If unification ever becomes serious, Western partners would insist on legality, democratic consent, of course, regional stability, minority rights, and clarity on EU law and NATO obligation on external border security.
Dr. Csongor Veres, thank you very much for sharing your insights and analysis with us. We appreciate your time, and it was a pleasure having you on the program. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un supervised tests of upgraded artillery and missile systems, which included a multiple rocket launcher. State media says it's part of a country's goal to modernize its missile program and bolster firepower along the southern border with South Korea. As Laura Westwick reports from Hong Kong.
State media says the tests included an upgraded multiple rocket launcher system, special mission warhead for tactical ballistic missiles, and extended range shells for a self-propelled howitzer. It says the latest rocket launcher is equipped with an autonomous precision guidance system. Its firing range had also increased to around 90 kilometers. State media says the warhead was designed to inflict fatal damage on major targets such as the enemy's airfields, ports, and electricity infrastructure. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un says that the tests showed progress as Pyongyang pursues automation, long-range capability, and ultra-precision in its weapons programs. He says the goal is to strengthen military capabilities along the southern border, and there is a need for what he calls national defense development to make sure no enemy dare to confront North Korea. South Korean media reported that with the latest tests, North Korea appears to be focused on improving strike capability that could put South Korea within its range. Pyongyang is under multiple sets of sanctions aimed at curbing its nuclear and missile programs. Analysts say that the tests are a show of force aimed at South Korea and point to Pyongyang's efforts to fortify the southern border and integrate nuclear and conventional forces. Earlier this week, Kim Jong-un vowed to beef up North Korea's defense capabilities, citing military modernization efforts by South Korea and the United States. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung discussed the situation on the Korean peninsula with US President Donald Trump at a G7 summit in France. He said President Trump had told him it was time to pay attention to the North Korea issue. Laura Westbrook for A News in Hong Kong.
South Korea is expanding its military drone program as it looks to strengthen defenses against North Korea. Seoul says it will train hundreds of thousands of specialized personnel and deploy tens of thousands of unmanned systems. Defense Minister Ahn Gyu-bak says the military plans to train 500,000 drone warriors and distribute unmanned systems across frontline units. The Defense Ministry later revised its drone production target to about 60,000 by 2029, down from an earlier plan for 110,000, including around 11,000 set to be introduced in 2026. Officials say the systems will be built entirely with domestically produced components. According to details obtained exclusively by A News, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen is set to visit Azerbaijan on July the 1st to deeply expand strategic energy and economic ties. This high-profile diplomatic mission marks the first trip to Baku since the signing of the landmark EU-Azerbaijan Strategic Energy Partnership 4 years ago.
A News can exclusively report that European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen will travel to Baku on July 1st to advance critical energy diplomacy and regional integration. This high-stakes visit marks her first return to the Azerbaijani capital since July 2022, when she signed a milestone strategic energy agreement with Baku. Sources indicate that the upcoming discussions will center on expanding bilateral economic engagement and enhancing collaboration in the energy sector, where Azerbaijan has increasingly emerged as a vital partner for Europe's energy security. The talks will also feature a comprehensive exchange of views on broader South Caucasus connectivity initiatives. Following her high-level meetings in Baku, von der Leyen, alongside EU Enlargement Commissioner Marta Koss, is scheduled to travel to Yerevan from July 2nd to 3rd, concluding a pivotal regional tour aimed at shaping the geopolitical landscape of the South Caucasus.
Rail transportation of petroleum products from Azerbaijan to Armenia is continuing. Another consignment of petrol and diesel fuel has now been dispatched as part of ongoing deliveries between the two countries. Our correspondent Gulcin Kocalieva reports.
Another shipment of petroleum products from Azerbaijan to Armenia has been dispatched by rail. The shipment includes AI-92 petrol and diesel fuel transported in 26 wagons towards the Boyukesik direction, located near the border area. The cargo consists of 18 wagons carrying petrol and 8 wagons carrying diesel fuel. The dispatch takes place on Friday as part of the ongoing transportation of fuel products between the two countries. So far, Azerbaijan has exported more than 14,000 tons of diesel fuel and over 4,000 tons of AI-92 and AI-95 petrol to Armenia. Azerbaijan's railway routes have also been used for the transit of other goods from Russia to Armenia, including grain, fertilizer, aluminum, buckwheat and anthracite. The latest shipment is part of ongoing cargo operations, with the process carried out at the railway facility. Gülçin Khojalyeva, Zohrab Shirinov, A News.
Russia has announced a ban on fish imports from Armenia. It's an extension of previous restrictions that affected most Armenian exporters to the Russian market. Russia's news agency TASS reported on Friday that the latest measure now includes the remaining 2 Armenian fish producers left out of the previous ban. It also coincides with Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan's re-election earlier this month. He has signaled a move away from relying on Russia and move towards the European Union. In the past, Moscow has imposed similar restrictions on products from Georgia, Poland and Turkey amid strained relations. At least 55 people have drowned in France while trying to cool off from a record-breaking heat wave as temperatures in Paris hit over 40 degrees. Authorities warned the death toll could rise, noting many victims were young people who entered prohibited waters to escape the extreme heat. The crisis has placed severe pressure on hospitals and infrastructure, forcing the closure of cultural landmarks and the cancellation of major events. The number of confirmed Ebola cases in the Democratic Republic of the Congo has risen to 1,155, including 304 deaths, according to government data released Thursday. Health officials reported 37 new infections and 5 additional deaths over the past 24 hours. They say intensified epidemiological and laboratory surveillance has improved the early detection of cases, but also highlights the continued spread of the virus through communities, with transmission increasing week by week. The FIFA World Cup has delivered another week of drama, with the group stage producing standout performances, surprise results and several teams securing their places in the knockout rounds. And a former footballer and English expert saying the US has no chance of winning the World Cup. Here is a look at all the key results from the past week and how they have shaped the race for the last 32. In Group E, Côte d'Ivoire edged Curaçao 1-0, while Ecuador pulled off an impressive 2-1 win over Germany. In Group F, Japan and Sweden shared the points in a 1-1 draw, while the Netherlands defeated Tunisia 3-1 to strengthen their position. And in Group D, Turkey claimed a thrilling 3-2 victory over the United States, while Paraguay and Australia played out a goalless draw. And after the break, we'll continue with the main stories shaping the region. Stay tuned. Welcome back to A News. Azerbaijan is marking Armed Forces Day, celebrating the 108th anniversary of the establishment of its first regular army units. Military marches and ceremonies are being held in Baku and across the country. Established in 1918, Azerbaijan's armed forces have undergone major modernization reforms. In 2020, the 44-day war with Armenia over the Karabakh region ended in an Azerbaijani victory and the liberation of several territories. Since then, Azerbaijan has continued to strengthen its military capabilities. According to global firepower data, Azerbaijan has the largest combined military force in the South Caucasus, including active personnel, paramilitary forces and reserves. NATO's special representative for the Caucasus and Central Asia, Ambassador Kevin Hamilton, has wrapped up a visit to Azerbaijan. He met senior officials for talks on regional security and the upcoming NATO summit in Ankara. In Baku, he met with the Hikmat Hajiev, assistant to the president, and deputy foreign ministers Araz Azimov and Elnur Mamadov. Hamilton called Azerbaijan a reliable NATO partner and welcomed progress in the Armenia-Azerbaijan peace process. He also highlighted Baku's role in NATO missions, energy security and support for Ukraine. Azerbaijan Airlines has taken delivery of its first Airbus A321neo, marking another step in the carrier's long-term fleet modernization program. The aircraft is expected to improve fuel efficiency, increase capacity on busy routes, and enhance the passenger experience.
Azerbaijan Airlines has introduced its first next-generation Airbus A321neo into service following its delivery from Airbus in Hamburg. The aircraft becomes the newest addition to Azal's growing Airbus fleet, which now includes the A319ceo, A320ceo, A320neo. The delivery forms part of an agreement reached in 2024 for 6 new Airbus aircraft, including 3 A321neos and 3 A320neos. 2 A320neos have already joined the fleet, with the remaining aircraft due to arrive by November 2026. The A321neo is expected to increase capacity on high-demand routes while improving operational efficiency. Compared with previous generation aircraft, it consumes around 20% less fuel and produces lower carbon emissions per seat, while offering a range of up to 7,400 kilometers. Passengers will also benefit from Airbus's latest airspace cabin, featuring larger overhead storage, redesigned interiors, full LED lighting, next-generation in-flight entertainment, and high-speed Wi-Fi. The latest delivery supports Azal's long-term strategy to expand its fleet to 50 aircraft by 2032, strengthening the airline's regional network while improving efficiency and passenger comfort.
Pakistan and Turkey are expanding their strategic partnership, which has long been centered on defense, into energy cooperation. It follows a meeting between the energy ministers on Thursday and comes as Pakistan looks to modernize its power industry. Mariam Zia reports.
Pakistan and Turkey are broadening cooperation beyond defense into one of Pakistan's most critical reform sectors. The two sides held high-level energy consultations in Istanbul on Thursday and signed 3 memoranda that cover key electricity sector institutions from both countries. The agreements combine Pakistan's electricity market operator and power planning authorities with Turkey's energy exchange, transmission, and electricity distribution institutions. They cover electricity market development, transmission planning, and digitalization. Pakistan's Energy Minister Sardar Awais Ahmed Khan Laghari said, Pakistan remains committed to drawing on Turkey's experience in electricity market reform, transmission development, and distribution modernization. His counterpart, Alparslan Bayraktar, reaffirmed Turkey's commitment to long-term institutional cooperation through technical exchanges, training programs, and joint projects. The agreements come as Pakistan seeks international expertise to modernize its power sector. They also mark a further step in broadening Pakistan-Turkey cooperation beyond defense into economic and infrastructure partnerships. Mariam Zia, A News.
Fuel supply disruptions in Russia following a series of drone attacks on oil refineries are raising broader questions for Central Asia. While Moscow grapples with shortages and fuel sales restrictions, neighboring countries are assessing the potential impact on their own markets and supply chains. Our correspondent reports from Almaty.
Kazakhstan's Energy Minister Erlan Akhenjanov says Russia has made no official request to import gasoline from Kazakhstan, dismissing reports that up to 50,000 tons of fuel could be shipped across the border. He said Astana had received no formal request, but added that any such request would be considered through the established procedure. The statement comes as Russia continues to face fuel supply disruptions following a series of drone attacks on Russian oil refineries. Refining output has declined, prompting fuel sales restrictions across dozens of Russian regions. Kazakhstan, meanwhile, says its domestic fuel market remains fully supplied by the country's own refineries. At the same time, the government is preparing to temporarily remove import duties on gasoline, diesel and jet fuel from third countries. According to officials, the measure is primarily aimed at facilitating imports from China if needed. Import volumes would depend on domestic demand. The impact is already being felt elsewhere in the region. In neighboring Kyrgyzstan, which imports more than 90% of its gasoline from Russia, reduced deliveries combined with seasonal demand have led to shortages of EI-95 and EI-98 gasoline. The government has responded by introducing temporary price controls and measures to support fuel importers. The developments suggest that disruptions to Russia's fuel sector are no longer confined to its domestic market, reshaping fuel trade and supply routes across the region. Farisa Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
Uzbekistan's eastern city of Andijan has officially been named the cultural capital of the Turkic world for 2026. The announcement was marked by a colorful celebration that also earned the country a new Guinness World Record. Our correspondent Sevil Rajapova brings more.
Andijan has officially launched its year as the cultural capital of the Turkic world, a title awarded by the International Organization of Turkic Culture, Turksoy. The designation recognizes the city's centuries-old contribution to Turkic history, literature and the arts. Andijan is widely known as the birthplace of Muhammad Babur, founder of the Mughal Empire, and for its rich traditions in music, dance and craftsmanship. One of the highlights of the celebrations was a record-breaking performance of the traditional Andijan polka. A total of 20,000 performers gathered at the Babur Arena to dance simultaneously, setting a new Guinness World Record. An official Guinness World Records adjudicator attended the event and confirmed that all requirements had been met before the record was certified. Throughout 2026, Andijan is expected to host festivals, exhibitions, scientific conferences and cultural exchanges, all aimed at strengthening cooperation among Turkic nations and showcasing the region's cultural legacy to international audiences. It is Sevil Rajapova reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
Now going back to the World Cup, Turkish fans celebrated in Los Angeles after a dramatic 3-2 victory over the United States. Despite the result, both teams move on differently, with the US topping Group D and advancing, while Turkey exits the tournament on a consolation high.
Turkish fans were in high spirits on Thursday night in Los Angeles, celebrating a hard-fought 3-2 victory over the United States, despite both teams already knowing their World Cup fate. Turkey, eliminated from knockout contention after earlier defeats to Paraguay and Australia, finally found their rhythm in a dead rubber match. They secured their first win of the tournament thanks to a dramatic late strike from Kaan Ayhan, sealing a morale-boosting result. For Turkish supporters, it was a moment of relief and pride after a difficult campaign.
We are feeling good because we did the goal. We were frustrated because we didn't get the goals, but now, I mean, we will have to try again in 4 years, but yeah, it's good to be back after 24 years. Yeah.
Excited. I mean, this is the first game we actually scored, and it was a win at the end. So we are going home, but it was a beautiful game.
On the other side, US fans were left frustrated after conceding a last-minute winner, though confidence in the host nation's progress remained high ahead of the knockout stage.
I'm disappointed that we lost just because I'm concerned about where we're moving into the round of 32. But I'm excited because obviously we put, our number ones back on. So USA, I truly believe in what we are as a country, and the team we have, it's the best I feel we've had. So let's go, right? Like, we're there.
I'm still confident. I think our guys can do a lot, and I think that Mauricio Pochettino is going to lead our guys to greatness.
Despite the defeat, the United States topped Group D and move on to the round of 32, where they will face Bosnia and Herzegovina. Turkey, meanwhile, bow out of the tournament, but end on a high note with a long-awaited victory to restore some pride before heading home.
And this concludes our news update for the hour. Thank you for your time and stay tuned to A News for more updates.